All right, I think we're about ready to start our live stream. Ask Me Anything today. Again, we're back on a regular Tuesday schedule. And I believe we will be next week as well, but I know there's a day coming up where I'm going to have to do this on a Monday. So for those of you who maybe haven't done this before, again, feel free to ask your questions or type them in, and I will be able to hopefully see them. And when I'm attempting to answer your questions, I will be basically linking them down here, so you should be able to see the questions that I'm attempting to answer at the time that you're asking them, or at least when you see me trying to do my best to answer them at that time. So feel free to bring up any of your questions that you have and enter them in. There's already a number here that have been entered up. If you want me to see your questions, there's a lot of people that comment back and forth. And so sometimes it's hard for me to pull the questions up and distinguish it from the commentary, which is fine. It's just that it's a little bit easier if you say @We the Governed, and it's a little bit easier for me to spot your question there. Something else, for those of you who were at the Friday banquet dinner the other day, where I was the MC for the Washington State Republican Party, their fundraiser dinner up in Bellevue with Riley Gaines as the primary speaker. Thank you for coming up and talking to me. I always appreciate the feedback in person, and that's always fun to get that. Also, for those of you who last night were at the Pierce County Republican event that I was invited to speak at, and we had kind of a bit of a Q&A session there, kind of equivalent to Ask Me Anything here, only in person. That was fun to see a lot of activists, especially those of you who are working so hard at the Puyallup Fair over the last couple weeks. This is one of the first time in about 3 years I haven't actually been able to stop by and volunteer at a fair booth there. Which is something I did over the last couple years when I was helping with some of the Let's Go Washington, volunteering to help collect signatures with the Let's Go Washington campaign at the time. And I remember that I went and worked the fair booth both the last 2 years. But anyway, it was good to see a lot of you guys that I know out in Pierce County. And just to give you a quick update here, because I know I've said I'm going to do this in the past. Sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't. If you are going to the Caper event on September 26th out in Spokane, I do plan to be there, and I'm going to be speaking at that event, and that's coming up this Thursday. On October 5th, I will be out in Jefferson County at their Oktoberfest event out there. I believe that's at the Boy Scout cabin out there outside of Port Townsend. I will also, and I believe that's the Jefferson County Republican Club that's putting on that event. On October 8th, which is the following Tuesday, and the reason why I'm not going to be doing a live stream that day, at least on the Tuesday of that week, I'll be at the Benton County Farm Bureau making a presentation out there. I think that's mostly for Farm Bureau members of Benton County, so I don't know. I don't know if they have that as an open event. I'm also expecting it to be in Redmond on the next day, October 9th. I'll be speaking at Sharon Hannock, candidate running for state treasurer, at the Redmond barn, and she'll be at the Willowcrest stables out there. I know I'll be speaking at that event. October 12th, I'll be out in Spokane again at the fundraiser that the Republicans are having out there. I'm not sure the location for that, but I'm sure that the Spokane County Republicans will be indicating where it is. October 17th, I believe it looks like I'm going to be out in Okanagan doing a training event out there for activists. It's still a little ways out, so I haven't worked out all the logistics of exactly what type of citizen activism training that they want. But if you happen to be in the Okanagan area, feel free to come on and join us there, and I'll have some time between now and then to clarify where we'll actually be meeting. And then on October 19th, I know I'm going to be the MC for the Ellensburg, the Kittitas County Republicans, and I believe they're doing it central, and they're doing kind of a fundraiser for candidates from around the state, and that'll be with the Kittitas County Republicans, and it's at the Central Washington University campus, and I believe that they'll have more information on their website as well. So that's just over the next month or so. I'm sure there's more than that that's going on, but that's basically a quick update. People have asked me sometimes to just give an update of places that I'll actually be, and so I expect that I'll be there over the next period of time. The other thing I was going to mention, and really this has more to do with the question that was here, but also as I look up here, there's like 3 questions in a row that are essentially about the same subject. So, Bonnie, you're saying, let's talk about the debate. And then Ben Garrett, your question here about takeaways from the governor's debate last week. In my opinion, Reichert did much better. I think he objectively won the debate. And then the third question that was related to about this was interesting note during and after the debates, the comment section under Ferguson's social media were mostly negative towards him, while the comments for Reichert's were positive. So these 3 questions I'll kind of lump together in just basically a brief conversation about the governor's debate, and also from last week. And also I had a video last week that went out about the governor's debate, the previous governor's debate, and just kind of a warning about a drinking game. Well, I'll tell you the one funny thing that came up in the second governor's debate is that Ferguson completely abandoned any reference to Trump in his, his spiels, which was a big change because the first debate, Ferguson entirely obsessed about Trump the entire time. In fact, you might forget that he was running for governor the amount of times that he simply obsessed and spoke about Trump. Obviously, he must have gotten some feedback from that, and he was ridiculed widely for his obsession about Trump. And so that feedback, in fact, some of the quotes that I had from the Stranger article that was referencing that original debate, which I thought were funny, about Ferguson, basically talking about him being a Weasley Democrat and nerd mad about issues related to speaking too much time or Reichert potentially speaking over him. Obviously, he must have taken some feedback, and so he totally changed up his game for the second presentation. And really, to Reichert's credit, he did too. Reichert actually came in and looked a lot more professional in this debate because he did wear a suit and tie, and it wasn't so casual like it was the previous debate. And also, Reichert was playing a lot more offense and less defense. Ferguson, of course, was trying to attack Reichert the whole time. But Ferguson really, his objective in this second debate was just not to look like an idiot and just to avoid saying anything that would indicate how dishonest he is about his background with the Attorney General's office, or the fact that he is exclusively responsible for looking the other way for pretty much every bad thing that was going on in Washington the last 12 years, ignoring the crime, ignoring the corruption, ignoring Chaz, ignoring the BLM riots, but having plenty of time to go after Flores in the Tri-Cities area, or Tim Imond, or whatever other individual activists that he could attack on the other side of the political spectrum. So I think that there was a pretty big difference. Most objective observers would probably look at that debate and clearly see that Reichert did a lot better. People who are aware of Ferguson's background will know that he's not telling the truth and that he's making up stuff as it relates to his sudden newfound concern that's never existed in his history ever before about law and order, but that suddenly probably reading the polling and realizing that he's at risk because of the fact that people who live in the greater King County area especially, but really anywhere in Washington state, especially the urban centers, are not happy about the rate of crime lately. The funny thing was, the Stranger, when they did their second debate review, totally changed tact, and they decided to ignore all Ferguson's problems and just spend their time attacking Reichert. I believe that if you look at the way the Seattle Times has kind of covered both the Let's Go Washington initiative campaigns recently and the governor's race, those are clearly the areas where the Seattle Times is concerned that you could have a breakdown of the Democrat monopoly in Washington state. Ferguson is not a strong candidate for governor compared to, I think, Inslee over the last 3 cycles. I mean, Inslee has actually been a pretty weak candidate for governor the last 2 times. It's just that the Republicans were not able to really capitalize on that weakness very well. And the Ferguson's challenge right now is that he is not well known, nor is he well liked among the people who do know him. There's really no enthusiasm for a Ferguson governor's race. It's more like he's the next guy in line, and so he's going to run, and he's got the fundraising backing him. But the activists don't like him. Really, nobody likes Ferguson. To know him is not to like him. But that's not necessarily what results in electoral success. I mean, that's the kind of thing that if you are the candidate for office, sometimes if you're the primary candidate, the Democrats' choice at this point in time, then the default assumption is that you're basically the person that's a coronation, not an election. I've heard that word actually used, that term and that reference used many times by Democrats in the past, even where I live in Thurston County. And so the belief that it's a coronation, not an election, is a risky thing for the Democrat attitude to have, because it presumes that the voters are irrelevant in that process. But and whenever they start taking the voters too much for granted, that's when they lose. So I don't know exactly how much this debate's really going to have an influence over any kind of electoral decision making moving forward. From Reichert's perspective, he definitely came across more effective than he was the first original debate. Neither of these guys are really skilled debaters overall, and it is what it is. Not necessarily every politician would be, but they both did better than they did the first time, and Reichert substantially did a lot better than he did the first time. And Ferguson, changed up his game, at least pretended not to have Trump obsession syndrome and Trump derangement syndrome. He dropped that. So my warnings about the drinking game concerns about you potentially developing alcohol poisoning if you actually had assigned a drinking game where you would drink every time he said Trump. I was wrong about that because Ferguson decided to abandon that side of his campaign. So anyway, we'll see. I don't know how much it's going to make a difference. We're in the home stretch. You're really down. Ballots drop in about 2.5 weeks, depending on which county you're in Washington State. For us, we don't have election night. We have election month. I would recommend people, if you're going to vote early, get it in, get it safely. And one of the concerns, you've heard other people talking about this probably around the country. I would have some concerns here too. This has been a crazy election time and a weird political season in general. And I would think that you're going to be a little bit better off getting your ballots in early than to trust. Certainly, dear God, don't trust the post office with your ballots. No guarantees it'll get there on time. We had lots of evidence during the recent hand recount from around the state of piles of ballots that were delivered, postmarked on time, and then not even delivered in time. So they literally took them longer than 2 weeks, and they conveniently just didn't get counted. Probably that made a substantial impact in the Public Lands Commissioner race that was so close for position number 2 that they had to do a hand recount. So those of you who sit back and wonder about waiting to the last minute to vote, nobody can stop you from doing that, but if you're going to do it, at least go in and deliver it by hand directly to the auditor's office, or deliver it to a drop box that is going to get picked up early. That would be my recommendation if you care about wanting your vote to count. Now, the biggest reason that I think, the debate was kind of a little sideshow to this whole thing, that the Seattle Times articles really kind of illustrate more their internal concerns about the fact that the Let's Go Washington initiatives, all 4 of them right now, the first things that show up on the ballot are going to generate a different profile of voter, and a lot of voters who are upset and annoyed and frustrated with the corruption, squandering, and waste of resources when you do send your taxpayer dollars, your tax dollars to the state. It gets squandered and wasted just like it does when you send it to the feds, and so at least a sizable percentage does. And people don't like the fact that they're paying higher cost of living for nothing. And the Climate Commitment Act in particular, which was just a silly scam game that Ferguson and Inslee pushed through at the last minute, I-2117 does repeal that cost of fuel costs, and that's going to directly impact everybody. It doesn't matter who you are in Washington State. It will reduce your cost of living if that initiative passed. So the Vote Yes, Pay Less program for Let's Go Washington, I think, is a pretty highly effective campaign. It's very popular. The left knows it's popular. The billionaires know it's popular. That's why they're spending tens of millions of dollars to try to stop and oppose it. And Ferguson's part of that as well. Inslee's part of it. All the political establishment's part of it, because it's just this big grifter operation where they get $1 billion in, they're kicking it out to their friends and their campaign contributors with no accountability. Nobody's tracking even where the money goes, whether it's going to do anything that people promise they're going to do with it. They're just trying to pretend like they need that money now because they've created new grifting operations with the cash they got in through that tax. So I think that the Vote Yes, Pay Less program is something that concerns the Seattle Times, which is why you saw the Seattle Times do hit pieces on the Washington State Republican Party and on Brian Haywood and anybody. You know, the Seattle Times is essentially just a corrupted entity that has absolutely zero attachment to any kind of journalistic integrity that might have existed there in the past, but probably hasn't for a long time, and they're just pulling off the mask now. And there's really no pretense to care about anybody in the state. It's so bad because essentially it's just the establishment's propaganda mouthpiece for whatever they want them to do. And, you know, the paper's obviously has a declining circulation issue, and they're not financially doing great. And so that's why you see them get grifting, you know, grants themselves now, which have clearly corrupted their ability to report honestly on almost anything. You also saw it with the way the Seattle Times dealt with the endorsement of the OSPI director, where Chris, you know, anybody who cares at all about education, which probably doesn't include anybody at the Seattle Times, but let's pretend that somebody there does, you know, they were able to recognize the total incompetence that Chris Reichel represented and the total destruction and just the pain that he's implemented in the education system, destroying it the best that he knows how. And then so they clearly came out, and they did attack him for that. But when the other candidate that was in the kind of the left lane in the primary didn't make it to the top two primary, and Dave Olson made it through, regardless of that, then the Seattle Times does this complete about face and suddenly endorses the guy that they've recognized is the worst OSPI director that Washington State's had in recent decades. I mean, there's no honesty, there's no accuracy at the Seattle Times. I'm more amused than anybody actually thinks that paper even hires journalists anymore. But nevertheless, it's always worth looking at that and finding out, what's going on. Shifting to, and by the way, I had two videos that I did today. One was just an update on a number of the politicians and PACs and stuff that I've caught breaking the law. Haven't done one of those in a while, and so there was a lot of violators that had kind of piled up either with fines or sanction notices or other things over the last few months. And so I just did it, and I was kind of reminded about it because last week Melanie Morgan, who is actually a legislator out of the 29th legislative district, I'd caught her last year break just an egregious violation of campaign finance laws. It took about a year, but the PDC suddenly came up with their settlement in her case, and so she had to pay a $1,000 fine. That was the 316th politician or PAC or judge or union group or whatever that I've caught over the last few years since I've been paying attention to the state's ethics and campaign finance laws. It was the 316th one that's actually been formally busted and sanctioned or fined by a state agency of some kind. So there's plenty more than that have actually broken the law that I filed complaints on, but some of them were given a free pass. But those ones, even the state agencies had to agree with me that they broke the law, and so she was fined recently. And it was just kind of a reminder to me, and her name's Melanie Morgan, but no relationship, at least that I'm aware of, to me. So I know I have a huge family, and they've been in the area a long time, but I don't think I'm related to her. But nevertheless, that was the latest violator, and I wanted to just do a quick video on updating people on that. Also did an update on just the political violence, which is kind of related to this question down below here, and just my concerns about the political violence trends in our country, the historical kind of position that you find yourself in, because there's been plenty of periods of time in history where we've had political violence fairly widespread in our country. And also the role that the censorship and preventing free speech, this desire of government to silence free speech in our country, I think the role that plays in accelerating or basically increasing the likelihood of more political violence moving forward. So here's a question. Thunderstriker here, with the recent 2 attempts happening this year, just within the last 2 months, how can we work together to ensure a more secure environment for our leaders? What measures can be taken to prevent future incidents? And it's ridiculous. And it is. I mean, fortunately, neither assassination attempt on Donald Trump was successful. We really haven't, other than the last time, of course, he had an assassination attempt that got this close was when Ronald Reagan was hit in 1981. And many people have already gone back and looked at these histories of Garfield and McKinley and Lincoln and Kennedy, and just looking at all the history of political assassination in our country. But it was scary how close two of them got now, especially with, I think, the obviously mistaken perception that the Secret Service has their act together and that they're an organized and functional entity, when it looks like they're just as incompetent as every other branch of government. And so the perception, I think, that many of us had that as a agency of government that they were functional, at least at a bare competency level, I think that reputation's been challenged lately with the two things that have occurred. Now, the bigger concern, of course, is how does some random Yahoo crazed leftist guy get information about last-minute changes to Trump's travel schedule, or at least where he's going to be, that's not made public, and how is he able to set up and be prepared to potentially shoot him or take him out at that point in time. I mean, it seems like very just random and fortunate that the one lone Secret Service agent who'd gone to the next golfing spot actually spotted the rifle sticking out of the fence and fired at it. And secondly, the only reason he was caught was because some random bystander just happened to take a picture of the car as he sped away, which apparently was a stolen vehicle. And regardless, that's how they were able to catch this guy. It's a little concerning that it's that random, especially considering the fact that we have a lot of drama coming out of the Butler, Pennsylvania attempted assassination effort where Trump was hit by a bullet. And had it only been just a few millimeters, in a different direction, he would be dead probably today, or at least severely injured, and more significantly than what we happened. And you had people die there at that event and get seriously wounded. What is apparently a very obvious oversight by the Secret Service, and the fact that the Secret Service is going dark and secretive and not reporting on what actually happened there. I mean, there's a lot of questions that have been raised, and this is not the time for government to be silent and secretive. Anyway, it's one is you're gonna have to reform the Secret Service. You probably would have to fire most of the senior management there. It seems like they got a lot of bad people in senior management at the Secret Service, just like most federal agencies seem to have developed over the last few years. So big house cleaning, and you probably have some policy changes you're gonna have to implement. And the Secret Service was not on my short list of one of the departments that really needed a lot of reform, but it clearly does. And, it's not a good thing if you're going to have a bunch of your political leaders start to drop. Unfortunately, what happens is it encourages more serious, hardcore assassination attempts probably in the near future. And so they're just not prepared, and that's not a good thing. Duck Farmer, does Ferguson have a really good chance? Yes, he does, because Ferguson is the obvious front runner. He still did come out in first position, even though it was a weak showing for an incumbent, the perception of an incumbent Democrat, because he was Attorney General. And so he's going to come in that first position. Now, 45% is not great for him, especially as he was a chosen one by the Democrat Party, and all the resources and support were behind him. Now, Mark Mullet, who was the moderate-ish Democrat that was running against Ferguson at the time, most of those votes are anti-Ferguson votes, and I believe that most of the Mark Mullet votes are more likely to go to Reichert. Same is true probably for most of the Byrd votes, other than just clowns that want to write in Byrd for no good reason. In case they don't know about the law, the sore loser law, basically the only people you can't really write in with any degree of effectiveness in a election campaign like this in the general is anybody who lost in the primary. There's no legitimate way that you can write them in and have it matter. You're just simply voting for Ferguson, giving a vote to Ferguson by not voting for Reichert. You have a binary choice at this point in time. But yeah, so Ferguson's the leader right now. Does Ferguson like Kamala? Kamala. I I think that he has a relationship with the vice president, just like any other leading state Democrat candidate would probably have. How close is he to him? I don't know, but he's going to be fairly close to him and to her, and so they're gonna wave their hands in the air and sing "Kumbaya," whether or not they like each other or not. So we just have to see. It's not like from Kamala Harris's perspective that Ferguson's that important of a person. It's a state that the Democrats presume at the presidential level they're going to win. The only reason the Democrat candidates ever come out to Washington State at this point in time is simply to extract cash from the many billionaires and super wealthy Democrat donors who live out here. It's the only reason that they come out to Washington State at all. They don't need to campaign out here very much. At least that's the perception that they have, because this is a state that would probably has leaned Democrat since Ronald Reagan anyway. So anyway, this is that's probably the way things are being looked at that level. Have you seen the? Okay, this is interesting. Brian B. Have you seen the trailer for Brandy Cruz's documentary that she's releasing today? I haven't. I'm glad you're telling me about that, because I will try to look that up. You'll have to tell me what that's about, because I haven't seen that trailer. Good question. And now you're giving me something to look up later after the show. Andrea K. Been seeing a lot of commercials against the initiatives, but none in favor. Thoughts? I know ads are expensive. Well, yeah, I mean, the billionaires oppose the initiatives. They want you to pay more. Remember, vote yes, pay less. Vote no, pay more. Because the billionaires, like Bill Gates, like Ballmer, like Nick Hanauer, like all these billionaire lefties in the state that are funding the majority of the campaign in opposition to the initiatives, they want you to pay more, because that reduces how much money they have to spend to promote their pet causes. They've essentially been able to save money by using their millions of dollars in influence operations to convince government to fund the projects they want to fund and make you pay for it. I mean, that's using other people's money. That's how these billionaires operate. And so, yeah, they're throwing tens of millions of dollars into this campaign. Remember, the initiative's passing, and this is the distributed cost concentrated benefits issue that we run into with a lot of government programs. The initiative's passing takes money away from a lot of grifting operations that a lot of people on the left and within those little paid-off special interests, they are counting on that cash to basically get it all for themselves, right, and fund their lifestyle, their plans, their operations. And so losing it is a big deal. For the regular person, they're just upset that they're paying a lot more in fuel and heating costs or whatever other costs that are associated with some of these scams and schemes. And so, but it's not the end of the world for them. It's bad. It's shifting things in a bad direction. Some people it pushes out of the edge and puts them into financial insolvency. But the average person overall, it just simply it's the more straws in the back of the camel. Who knows which one breaks your back, but it's breaking some backs, and but it's hard to motivate people like that to have the same level of financial opposition. So the Let's Go Washington people don't have the same kind of budget to run an ad campaign. So as predicted 6-8 months ago, at least, when I was talking about this back then, these guys are going to put a heck of a lot of money in, and we knew Nick Hanauer was going to do it. We knew SEIU, the WA, a lot of these teachers unions. We knew that they were going to throw everything in the kitchen sink to try to stop these initiatives from passing. So no surprise. That's why you're going to see it. I did not see, this is a good question, David Daniel, have you seen the debates of Governor and AG? I feel Pete Serrano did good, but Nick might take the cake, sadly. Dave did a good, but scared that it won't be enough. And going back to my previous comments about the debates, I have no idea how much the governor's debate really makes a huge difference at the end of the day in whether or not people vote for different candidates. I've just never seen it's people. Because we saw the Trump-Biden debate completely end Biden's campaign, right? That is not the history of most debates. Most debates come up and there's sound bites, there's memories you might get out of it because of that, but generally most debates are forgotten. Now, I like debates because it allows you to at least contrast the two candidates in a similar forum where they're at least in some way, even when moderated, there is some response back and forth between the two of them, and I think that's good. you're not going to see the Lincoln Douglas debates in modern times, but at least you're able to get the sense of who these different people were. When I was at the Freedom Foundation years ago, we used to organize, one year in particular, I want to say it was the 2012 election cycle. I remember we organized debates for the state auditor and Secretary of State, and I can't remember if we did the treasurer that year. I did help out, though, on some of those debates. And I thought they were great because most of the time people don't even know what those candidates are really doing. And so, even who they are. It's a random guess, partisan blue team, red team sort of decision at that point in time with no knowledge of who they are. And I think the debates are pretty good if you can get them out there. So I've always been a fan of debates, but I'm not totally sure that they have like some secret sauce solution in changing the direction of the race at a state level. I did not see the AG's race. I'll have to look at it. Again, Pete Serrano and Nick Brown. Nick Brown's a Democrat, Pete Serrano's a Republican running there. Again, a Democrat running for statewide office is always going to be considered in first position, even if they didn't do that well in the primary. The general assumption is that party voting down ticket stays fairly consistent from the governor's race on down. And there's some truth to that. There are people that cross over and vote for different people regardless of their party affiliation, but that's not a large percentage of the population. Of course, you only need a couple percent to do that to make a huge difference in a race. So will that happen in the AG's office race? I don't know, but if it does, it's probably not going to happen because of a debate. That being said, it was good that Pete went and did this. I'm very glad they did it. I'm going to have to go back and actually look at how it did so I can speak about it intelligently. But right now I can't. Janice Lohman, we need Seattle Republican. I presume you're saying you want to make Seattle Republican. And that is a great aspiration. I am not totally sure how you would go about doing that, but I think you could definitely you could see a voting profile change in Seattle with an effort over time there, especially addressing the issues that people actually care about in Seattle that the Democrat Party pretty much ignore. You have to provide that alternative option there, and it can be done, but it takes a lot of planning ahead of time, and it's not that simple. Dane Kirkendall, I just got my military ballot, and I've lined up my wife and mother to vote yes, to pay less, and for Reichert, etc. I was a little disappointed. The initiative wording seems to favor Dems. The initiative wording always favors Dems, but it is not as bad as a referendum, which is the other types. I don't want to get into the whole explanation right now between a referendum, initiative to the people, initiative to the legislature. But the reason why you're saying that is there's wording in there that says, oh my God, if they reduce these taxes, it's going to end the ability to fund critical functions in government today, which is a total lie, of course, but that's part of what the legislature put in because they were so upset about the fact that most people will vote in favor of tax cuts if given the option. And the Democrats know this, so they're trying to do everything they can to tip the scales in the other direction. I still believe that most of these are going to be viewed positively. And to have experience with government is to know that it's corrupt, inefficient, and incompetent at best. And so because more people are interacting with government more now than ever, I don't believe that, I still believe you have a large reservoir of people who just want to save more of their own money because government's idea that they can take your money and spend it more effectively than you can is rarely viewed as a effective tool or argument for most people, but we'll have to see. But thank you for getting that early. I know military UCAVA votes typically do go out early, and you're going to be some of the first people to vote. Get them in quick. James Dean, is there any update on the future of Let's Go Washington? A rep was in my neighborhood out here in Pearson indicated there are more initiatives in the works. I'm sure that the Let's Go Washington campaign will probably be looking at some more initiatives to consider for next year, but they're not going to do anything between now and November about those other initiatives, most likely, since after all, they are trying to run a campaign and win the election for the initiatives that they already have on the ballot. Logically, that's where you're going to put your energy and time into it. So a lot of people are putting in some different ideas for different initiatives in the future. I like that idea. I think that is what people should do. If for no other reason, it's kind of a wonkish idea, and it's something that you can look at different ideas that would make sense for an initiative. So I think people should be coming up with those ideas, and I'm sure there's some people at Let's Go Washington that are looking at that. But one, you just need to get out there, and there's a triage decision tree, amount that you have to go through, and looking at what's a realistic initiative to run. And you got to figure somebody has to invest a lot of money into it. So it's not just a throwaway idea like, hey, it just cost me $10 and I'll just try something. It takes some money to actually run an initiative. So you have to put a little bit of energy into it, and probably see if it has a reasonable likelihood of passing, what kind of language the ballot title would need to have in order to increase the likelihood of people understanding what it is so they would be willing to vote for it. Is it a popular idea? Does it actually do what you're trying to do? Single subject? There's all these other issues and rules around running an initiative. It's not as simple as people think. But if anybody's going to do it, the Let's Go Washington people, sponsored by Brian Haywood, are the people that are probably going to make that happen. Janice Lowen, I'm in Seattle, and I'm voting Trump. Thank you very much. Hopefully you're voting for the other good folk down ballot from there as well, and the initiatives as well. You aren't alone. There's plenty of other people that do. Try to see if you can get some of your neighbors to do the same. And same person, Janice here, saying I talk to older immigrants, and I'm telling them to vote for Kamala. U.S. or is a vote for communism, telling them to get their friends to vote Trump, and they agree. That's great, Janice. If you're able to influence other people, and frankly, that's one of the most common paths to changing the way ballots come in compared to the way that they are projected to come in from an area. It's if you have a lot of people out there telling other people, hey, this is how you need to vote, or convincing them to vote a different way. I think there was somebody that was interviewed on the Dan Bongino show recently. I don't remember the guy's name. He's out of Pennsylvania, but he had personally gone out and influenced and registered, a vast number of new voters in Pennsylvania that are conservative profile and more, and it's an amazing successful effort that he's had. And so in that effort, his volunteer, dedicated kind of crusade over the last few years to get that done seems to be likely to tip the balance in that state. Just one guy out there making that kind of a difference. We don't have that same kind of movement in our state that I've ever seen recently, but small movements where you're influencing small groups of people can still make a big shift. I know I have hundreds of people every year that come contact me and ask me how to vote for these positions and that, and probably the conversations that I have with them make a difference and change perhaps who they would vote. Probably not so much for the presidential races, but in lower races where they're just less familiar with the candidates on the ballot, I'm sure that I have some influence in that way. And probably many of you have the ability to do the same thing with friends and neighbors and acquaintances and other people that you know. If you have the ability to do that and influence people in a productive way, I would do that. And, listen, you need more people on your side, especially in a place like Seattle, where you probably are going to be talking to people that have never once in their entire existence heard your side of the story. Ben Garrett, do you think that the Seattle Police Officers Guild's endorsement and the Farm Bureau's endorsement of Reichert will help him? I do think that the Seattle Police Officers Guild's endorsement is probably not a surprise, nor is the Farm Bureau's endorsement a surprise. Despite Ferguson's sudden found rediscovery of the fact that farmers exist not just as targets for his office to destroy, but as people that he's kind of pretending to court with some grifting kickback schemes that he's probably coughing up. Ferguson's been nasty to farming, and he's been hostile and just cruel and evil to pretty much anybody who lives rurally. Every policy he supports is hostile and nasty to anybody who lives outside of downtown cities. And then, of course, in the cities, his pro-crime policies, or at least his willingness to look the other way and allow crime to flourish, those policies don't really support him with that group either. However, political insiders are going to support Ferguson, and any organization that's remotely sane is probably going to be in opposition to him. And by the way, it's not that easy a position to take either, because Ferguson's nasty and vindictive, as many people on the left are. And so, they'll attack the Seattle Police Officers Guild later on. They're going to get punished for not endorsing Ferguson. That's pretty typical. So anyway, we'll just have to see. Jason Fisher, what's your thoughts on the Ohio J.D. Vance Trump lawsuit by Haitians saying Trump's tweets is harassment and should be criminally charged? I mean, listen, we're going to over-criminalize free speech, and we have been going down this road for a long time. Listen, I've been in litigation, pointless litigation, over essential free speech issues multiple times in the past. And generally, they're just absurd. But the danger over time is that when judges start to allow those to proceed, then it does stifle free speech. And it really, the other thing it does is it encourages anonymous speech, and a lot less, it pushes things out of the open where it's going to be free speech. And it pushes them into, I believe, violence at times. I think in the more extreme cases, you can push people into violence. You can also drive the conversations instead of being out in the open. It makes them more secretive and dishonest. And this destruction of free speech in our country, or the threats against free speech, I think are one of the key elements that could lead to horrific unintended consequences. Now, perhaps intentional by the left because they like violence and chaos, but for those who, you may be convincing some of the less capable or certainly more ignorant people into thinking that some kind of suppression of free speech is okay. People like that probably aren't intending for the bad outcomes that inevitably come about for that. So we'll have to see. Let's see. Here's another question. Scully, when are we going to be getting our voters' pamphlets? I believe that the voters' pamphlets are supposed to go out a week before the ballots. I would expect to see them starting to arrive in about 2 weeks, possibly sooner. Got to remember, depending on where you live, there might be 2 voters' pamphlets. There's going to be a statewide voters' pamphlet that covers most of the races, but I'm not sure how many counties right now are publishing their own for the local races. There's going to be some differences county to county. Typically, counties are the ones that publish them. But you should be seeing it pretty soon. Again, the post office has fallen apart on this one, too, where their delivery of voters' guides has not been consistent around the state based on a lot of feedback that I've gotten lately. So we'll see. Let's see. Ben Garrett, even if the GOP only wins 1 or 2 statewide offices, that would be a victory, and it would be, I agree. How do you think it would work with potentially a Republican governor working with a bunch of Dems? Well, I mean, here's the thing. It would be a fairly big deal to have a Republican elected as governor in Washington State, first time since 1984. The fossilized and ossified bureaucracy that has been pretty much unaccountable since that time is where the biggest impact that a governor can actually make is in starting to clean up some of the bad and corrupt leadership that exists within those agencies. And so and also all the appointed positions, probably maybe doing some consolidation and clean up in some of those areas. That's where you can make a big impact. And a lot of that you can do without a lot of it certainly falls into the executive level of government. Where you're going to run into differences is that it moderates the Democrat legislature because they're no longer able to, at least they shouldn't be able to, basically use their special interest to bribe the governor to go along with whatever scheme they have, like the Climate Commitment Act. You're just not going to have those kind of bills come out of the legislature at all. So it will moderate significantly the abusive legislation that the Democrats have pushed for a long time. And remember now, you still have a sizable number of Republicans in both the Senate and the House. I would predict that the Republicans probably pick up at least a seat or 2 in one or both houses. It looks likely that that's possible. I hate to necessarily, make a projection, but the Republicans should, even with the incompetent scale and repetitive stupidity of their consultants, even with that, they should be able to pull off a couple wins in some of these legislative seats. So a couple more Republicans in the legislature and a Republican governor would actually be massive. Very few people have actually, very few people could really understand the significance that you would see in the state of Washington if that happened. So that would be a big deal. Would there be fights and battles? Yes, absolutely. Would either side get what they want? No, probably not, but you'd probably see a substantial shift in more reasonable approach to legislation. You'd probably have a lot less just junk coming out of the legislature, and you'd see some the governor veto, if they're doing the job right, veto stupid legislation that the Democrats may send up their way. So that would be pretty interesting. Cristiano Suzuki, what happens next to Ferguson? I'm assuming that's what you mean. Once election's over and he's not elected. Well, hopefully he's not elected. I would anticipate if Ferguson follows the road of previous attorney generals, mostly he's likely to get a position in a law firm somewhere up in Seattle where he lives. So that would be what I would predict and expect from him. You'd get a chance to get paid a lot more than he's probably making right now and doing a lot less, although he's not exactly known for being a workaholic currently as Attorney General. So this is interesting. No name, so I'm not even sure who's leaving that comment. Other than the fact that he's a Democrat, what are the main things drawing voters to Ferguson? Well, probably the only other, other than the fact that he's just a D and blue team, red team sort of voting patterns, the other benefit that Ferguson would get is he's probably made a lot of promises to deep pocket special interests. And so, and that's particularly, the Democrats are particularly capable of doing that. So he could say, listen, I'm going to make sure that the Climate Commitment Act kickback scheme and the grifting grants that you've been getting for a while, that I'm going to keep that going and maybe increase it. And therefore, if you vote for me, you're going to get that, whereas you're not going to get that if the Republican gets into office. Those types of behind-the-scenes negotiations are pretty common at this level. And so that's what I would expect that why you'd get some votes. Some people would say, hey, listen, I'm going to get, this is the free stuff program, right? Or the kickback schemes or whatever it is. There's a large and a shockingly large percentage of the population that either believes that they either do get it and they get a lot of money currently with their various schemes that they extract taxpayer cash, or they believe they could, or they'd be more likely to. And so people are going to use financial benefits like that, internal kickback schemes. That's a pretty easy way to buy support. So that's the only other reason I could think of for Ferguson. And again, Reichert has to make the case politically why you would want to vote for him, right? So that's always the challenge. Republican candidates have to be able to demonstrate that they're going to be a different person than the crazy leftists that they're running against. So this question right here, and you're seeing it down below here from Scully, and they charge you an arm and a leg for their propaganda online, or you get firewalled. I am not totally sure the context of that statement. Maybe you're talking about mainstream media, that you have to go through these paywalls to see some of the media stories, and that they want to charge you. I don't pay for any of the traditional media. Why bother? It's just, unless you just really want to know what the propaganda is that's being sent out to you, there's no real reason to look at things like the Seattle Times or King 5 News. It's just a... they're not real journalists, right? Just think about the narrative. They want to protect government's narrative. That's their whole reason for existence now. And so it's helpful if you just want to know what the narrative is the government wants you to be aware of, but you're certainly not going to get any journalism from them anymore. Susan Dorr, I'm not even really sure who you're talking about. Why did the Baptist Church not tell us it was satanic? Colton Yelm has a big presence in Shelton. Why? Who do they worship? I'm assuming you're talking about the Ramtha School of Enlightenment, led by J.Z. Knight. He's channeled a 35,000-year-old Lemurian warrior spirit named Ramtha, traveled through space and time to leap through her face and to convince people that you should vote for Democrats, although recently, apparently Ramtha's telling people to vote for Trump. It's not really a worship thing. They're going to argue that is not a religion, even though it's treated like kind of a religion. But it's just J.Z. Knight's scheme that she's been running for a long time. I don't know about the Baptist Church. I have no idea what you're talking about there. So I have no clarity on what you're referencing in that case. T.Z. Burton. Georgia election board member was on CNN criticizing fellow board members on election-related issue. How do these people get on boards, and how do we appoint state board members here? Good question, actually. The election, I'm not sure which person you're talking about in Georgia, so I'm not fully aware of how Georgia does it. But at least in Washington State, you have canvassing boards that are set up. And generally, you have 39 counties. Each county has an auditor, or in King County, they have an election supervisor, which is the equivalent function of the auditor's election process that's managed in the other 38 counties. And so there's a canvassing board that's established. In theory, usually it's some elected officials that are put together so that there's no one dominant control over that canvassing board. Mostly the canvassing board is a fairly boring position to be on. In Thurston County, you'd have one county commissioner. You're going to have a number of other people that are on that board, but usually they get appointed to it from respective elected bodies. Anyway, their job is going to do, you're going to have Thurston County will have a couple hundred ballots, maybe more, where because somebody did some weird way of writing in letters or writing in the oval, or that something was crossed out, or there's some questionable decision that they're going to have made over how should this vote be counted on this ballot. And those all go to the canvassing board to make a decision or a ruling at that point in time. Technically, they have rules that they have to follow, but there's always going to be a couple of these edge cases that come up, and that's one of the key roles the canvassing board has. They also certify elections, formally sign off and certify elections, but nowadays, I doubt any of them in our state would probably be willing to really jump in and decide that they want to reject something unless it's just so egregious and out of control that they get involved in it. Also, one of the things the canvassing board does do in some counties is deal with the individual voter challenges, which is a process that we've used to illustrate people that actually aren't real or don't exist on the voter rolls that are still there. You can individually challenge them and go through this process. The Democrats hate that. They want to take away that option, as do the county auditors, because it's a lot of time for them to process it. The state statute probably needs to be updated to make it a simpler process. I don't doubt that. But if they did a better job cleaning up the voter rolls, we wouldn't have to keep using that as a tool to illustrate the deficiencies that exist in the current voter roll process. But it's a good question, and appointing people at these different boards is a big role of the governor. I mean, the governor has the ability to influence. Now, he doesn't control who's on the local canvassing boards, but any of these boards, there's a ton of them. The governor appoints. More significantly, and more importantly, actually, is that they appoint judges when there's a vacancy. And these are the things you'd actually have a big impact with a Republican governor. Incompetent or corrupt? This is T's question here. And when it comes to government, some of you have heard me say this. I'll say it again because it's a phrase that I've used for a long time, but I think it references the accuracy of what government is today. When you look at government, it largely functions like a mountain of corruption that's concealed by an ocean of incompetence. And corruption is best concealed by incompetence because the dividing line between incompetence and corruption can be a fuzzy line. It's hard to necessarily define itself. So the number one defense that government has when you expose money that's been stolen or kickback schemes or some other level of dishonesty in government or corruption in government, the first defense of bureaucracy in government is to say, we're not corrupt, we're just incompetent clowns. And it's a very believable defense because most people's interaction with government would generally support the fact that they probably are incompetent clowns most of the time, or at least common enough that it's unremarkable. And so that's one of the challenges when you're actually digging out corruption in government. Is it corruption or is it incompetence? And, sometimes it's obviously corruption really clearly, but usually it's a little bit fuzzier, And the bureaucracy, and particularly people who like big government, which is usually Democrats, not always, but usually, the bureaucracy always wants vague and impossible to define or enforce regulations and rules when it comes to their own ability to do their jobs well. And so they're able, when they realize, oh no, some of us are getting in trouble because we're breaking ethics laws or other rules, then let's change the law to make it easier for us to not break those rules and therefore have less accountability and less transparency. And that's usually the direction that they go in. This is this is a common issue with dealing with some kind of accountability and transparency in government. You really have to be aware of that tendency. It is not a conspiracy as much as it's just a bandwagon effect in the nature of man when you're put into those kind of positions. And it's something that we need to work on. Scully, what can be done to get school measures back on normal election ballots? I'm sick of them being on separate ballots and that don't get even 25% of the voters to respond but pass anyway. Gosh, this is a great question. Scully, I like that question. That's actually a really important one. This is actually something years ago when I was at the Freedom Foundation, one of our policy recommendations had been to eliminate special election times on the calendar completely and go to a primary and general election only, because right now you have multiple special election dates in February and I believe the other one's in March or April. I don't know why I don't know that anymore. It used to be you had 3. There was a change in state law that moved it down to 2, but basically you have a couple of these windows of time. And it's a terrible way to run elections because the participation rate, you're absolutely accurate, is substantially less. But remember, big government and the people that push for special election dates are the same people who want that cash so bad there is no law they won't try to break or push or tweak or, shift in their direction. And it's one of the problems, I think, with these special election dates. They shouldn't have them. I completely agree with you on that. They need to have them in August during the primary or the general election in November. Preferably, if there's a tax increase, I think it has to be on every November's ballot. We've seen examples recently in Whatcom County where, just a complete scam tax was passed with just very handful of votes up there. And then when the people realized what happened with a very small percentage turnout, they wanted to put it on the ballot and repeal it. And basically a corrupt judge up in Whatcom County decided that it's the Hotel California. You can vote yourself a tax increase. You can't vote one out. Now, I don't think that's going to withstand scrutiny at a higher court system, even in Washington State, but corrupt judges like that are able to really cause lots of problems. And that door is open because of these special election dates. I think if that tax had been on a regular election where more people could have examined it and understood what was going on, then I think it would have been rejected. But we will see. And I would say that if I was going to do one of the key reforms I would have, because here's the thing, it saves the money for the auditor's office as well. They don't have to run multiple elections like this. And the auditor's office kind of likes these special elections because it lets them test some of their systems and make sure they still know how to run elections. But I think that they could handle that and save a lot of money and only do 2 elections a year, our August primary right now and our November general, and I think that would be fine. And that's how it should be. From a good government reform standpoint, I completely support it, and it's a good policy change that we should have. Ben Garrett, do you think that Ferguson's opposition to the initiatives will hurt him? I'm pretty sure that most people favor the 4 initiatives. Most people probably do favor the 4 initiatives. If most people understand what the 4 initiatives do, the favorability actually increases even higher. So the opposition to the initiatives has to basically throw all kinds of stories and invent all kinds of drama in order to oppose it. And, some people will be fooled by it. But I think most people, if they bother to spend a little bit of time looking at it, they'll decide, yeah, this is a good idea, and they'll vote yes on most of them. And Ferguson's opposition to them, he would be ostracized by most of his donor base if he didn't oppose them. So I really think it's simply logical that he would oppose them because he has no choice. He would lose a lot of his donors and his support. There's a lot of money that's going into the opposing initiatives, and the same donors that are doing that are also giving Ferguson money as well and supporting him. If he suddenly came out and said, hey, I love these initiatives, yeah, vote yes, pay less, he would lose so much money support. And again, Ferguson cares only about one thing, and that's himself and his power base and the amount of money he needs to raise to convince people that a very unlikable and untrustworthy guy should be in that position. It's going to take a lot of money to convince people to do that, which Ferguson does have the advantage. He has raised 2 times what Reichert's raised, and Reichert's not been a slouch in raising fund money, but basically Ferguson's raised a lot more. I don't know what that comment's about. Let's see. Ben Garrett, do you think Ferguson defending the initiatives will hurt him? I heard from somewhere that it might because most of his supporters don't support the initiatives. Okay, and this is more of a function this is a wonkish question because you're really dealing with the fact that the Attorney General's office is the agency assigned to writing the title and then ultimately assigned to legal defense of the initiatives. Now, the difference would be in this case that you have Let's Go Washington, which does have deeper pockets and is a little bit more capable in defending and being able to afford to defend their own initiatives, so they would intervene and you would have a little bit more complex litigation going on. And it would make it a little bit harder for the Attorney General's office to sabotage itself. Ferguson kind of made this argument on the secret attempt by his donors to throw the initiative process out that he concealed from the initiative sponsors, that he got a little bit of blowback on, and he knew that he was dishonest and corrupt to do that. But Ferguson's fully willing to break the law and be corrupt and dishonest if he thinks he can get away with it and nobody will hold him accountable, particularly if it's to the benefit of his big donors. He's demonstrated that level of corruption repeatedly, and that's who he is. So I'm not sure that, on one hand, he doesn't want to ever appear to have any support of these initiatives, even if he's legally obligated to go out and support it. So anyway, we'll see. Kodiak Girl, I'm ready to sign a vote in person hand count initiative. Are you? Sure, I'd be ready to do that, but I'm not totally sure that would pass right now. It is getting closer to passing now than it would have been 5 years ago, for sure, which is good news and an improvement, I think, in how people have seen some of the election processes. Like when I first got involved and did the first survey that I think I was involved in doing this back in 2011 is what I remember. And it was shocking how many people supported mail-in voting, but it was mostly out of ignorance at that time. I think as people have started to peel back the onion and understand all the problems that are related to it, now I think the support for it's going down. But again, one of the things that we see about election rules and laws generally is that whichever side thinks they're winning under the current structure or the system that exists, they're the ones that will always be in opposition to any change of that system, even if it's very clearly wonkish improvement policy-wise. They're not going to support it because they believe they benefit under the current system, so why change? And remember, that's who your elected officials are. They've all been elected in this current system, Republican and Democrat, so they're unlikely to want to change it that easily. So it's going to take some work to convince a majority of people to do it, at least enough that you can get people to invest $1.3 million or more to actually get that initiative on the ballot. And then the multi-million-dollar campaign, and probably more like a $10 to $15 million campaign against it. So you're going to have to try to fund a multiple $1 million campaign, at least just to keep it alive. It's not as easy as you think. Alex Brown won. Do you think Reichert will actually win? I just really don't see Washington voting in a Republican governor. Reichert has the best chance of winning as a Republican governor since 2012 when Rob McKenna got fairly close. So there's a reasonable chance of Reichert winning. Is he the underdog? Absolutely. Is Ferguson in first position in this race? Absolutely. Is Ferguson, he carries a lot of baggage, he has a lot of problems, but Reichert has a chance, and it's a pretty reasonable chance. It's not like some kind of miracle imagination chance, but it's still, he's going to be the underdog in this case. Some things are hard to predict right now when it comes to voter turnout models, because in the end, that's ultimately what does have a big influence on this. Even with election games and shenanigans that can happen on the margins with the election process, you still need to have enthusiastic turnout, and I'm not sure how much enthusiastic turnout you have for Harris. Trump's base is enthusiastic about him, but the question is that a majority of the state of Washington, and it probably isn't. It's a sizable plurality, but it's not going to be a majority necessarily. So then the question comes, is how foaming at the mouth, fearful, angry, and hateful of Trump will the left be to vote for anybody? Anybody. They would vote for anybody versus Trump. That's a pretty big, sizable chunk of the left as well in this state. And so this is the enthusiasm gap between those two, and how does that trickle into the governor's race? The other question is, that's an unknown quantity here, which is these 4 initiatives, Vote Yes, Pay Less. Those initiatives are likely to drive some profile of undecided or apathetic or otherwise uninvolved voter to come out and vote, if for no other reason than just for those 4 issues. And then the presumption is some of them will still keep voting down ballot after the initiative process. and what type of profile are they more likely to fit, a Republican profile or a Democrat? I would argue that as they may be independent or uninvolved, probably they fit a little bit more of a Republican profile, which is one of the reasons also why the Democrats don't like these initiatives. How will that affect the actual turnout? I don't know. Aaron Chan, what would happen if Kamala Harris desperately begged Donald Trump for another debate, but he denied her requests? I don't know. I mean, probably not much. Each side's going to spin it for their own reasons. And of course, the rules, you had Trump debating the moderators as well as Kamala Harris's last time. So I don't know. We'll just see what happens. Brian, I'm assuming you're referring to Brandy Cruz's documentary. I'm interested in seeing it, so thank you for letting me know about that. Here's Thunderstriker. Also, what Aaron just said, Trump has faced life-threatening situations twice, yet he still hasn't backed down. He loves his country. Thoughts about that? Well, I mean, obviously that's Trump's appeal at this point in time, and it was a very dramatic change. I mean, remember the exact same people that tell you right now that Kamala Harris is qualified to be president. They're the same people that were telling us 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, that Biden was qualified and perfectly capable and, this amazing guy behind the scenes. And he's clearly, what everybody has known for years. He's a dementia patient on the steep decline. Nobody really knows he's running government right now, and that's a little scary. But the people who are supporting Harris, the same people that were supporting Biden and lying about him a few months ago, Trump had such a crazy thing happen out in Pennsylvania that it really illustrated a totally different type of person who's completely committed to going all the way on this. And I think that's going to be attractive for some middle-of-the-road voters who will cross over and vote for him. T.Z. Burton, can I just go out and cover up graffiti on the highways since no federal or state agencies will? Can we get juveniles who are arrested to do it as part of a deferred sentencing? Well, those are two totally different questions. Could you go out and cover up graffiti on the highways? Yes, you could. Would they stop you from doing it? I don't think so. That's a good question. This actually was an issue that came up back in the 80s and early 90s is what I kind of remember. And I think most of the time, if you decide to go out and you're trying to take care of it, even on public places like that, you'd probably be able to get away with it. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe the law enforcement could throw the book at you for something, but it'd be very unusual, I think. So yes, you could probably do that. It used to be back then in the 80s and 90s, I remember community groups getting together. They would get together and they would cover up graffiti. So that is something that you can do. If you ask permission to do it, I'm sure you'll be thrown into the eternal bureaucracy where they never give it to you and it takes them 5 years to make a decision. But otherwise, I think you actually could do that. That's kind of interesting. But then again, now your second part of your question, which is juveniles who are arrested doing it as part of deferred sentencing. That's possible too, but I think there's a lot of rules around those types of deferred sentencing requirements. And the other thing is even picking up litter on the side of the road. I mean, there are safety considerations and insurance issues that are around that. I'm not sure how it applies to the graffiti issue, but anyway, we'll just have to see. Alex Brown, Ben Garrett, probably responding, yep. Streaks do eventually come to an end. Why would Trump, Thunderstriker here, why would Trump debate on a liberal network when Kamala could face tougher questions on a right-leaning channel? Isn't she the one running scared, facing unbiased moderators? Sure, that's true. Kamala's probably not even capable of functioning in that environment, which is why I don't think you're going to see another debate at the presidential level. I just don't think it's going to happen. Salty Raiders fan, why is the Electoral College biased in Washington and Oregon via Seattle, Portland? Isn't it supposed to balance the vote? Yeah, the Electoral College, I wouldn't say it's biased in Washington or Oregon. The Electoral College was intended as basically a tool to force future presidential candidates to actually campaign around the country and prevent just one big population base from simply dominating the entire election process for president. It required the president to stay involved. If you look at the origins of it, small local states, smaller states in the original 13 colonies, they still wanted to be relevant, even though they were outnumbered by their more populous neighbors. They wanted to still have some pull. Now, they wouldn't have the equal representation in Congress. but they could have some representation in the Senate, and they would have some value because of the Electoral College in the actual presidential election as well. And that's essentially where it's grown from. Now, there has been some argument and some theories put forward that, similar to Maine and Nebraska, that you could have a split Electoral College sort of result in Washington or Oregon, just like you do there, or California, or the places like that. Democrats wouldn't like that because it means that there would be a lot of votes going to Republicans at the Electoral College level, and it would mean that no Democrat could ever be elected again in America. So they wouldn't go for that. But if you were able to get that through and pass at the state level, like Nebraska, like Maine, it's already been upheld as constitutional, then you would have a little bit more. It kind of waters down the Electoral College a little bit, but it still is considered legal according to Supreme Court decisions, and that would split up how the Electoral College is allocated, and it would make it allocated more by congressional district. Longer conversation to get into there, but good question. Airport, James Dean, any news on the proposed airport in the South Graham area? I don't have any new news on it, but thank you for asking about that question. I know it kind of died before, and we were going to look back at that and find out about it. I don't have any information on it now. Then King County Council approved placing lithium BESS anywhere in the county that is an agricultural zone. The ag land is 3% of county. Giant lithium batteries coming to a neighborhood near you. That's great. Thank you for that. I'm not sure that King County Council, it's a terrible idea, but of course it's the flavor of the week, and that's what they'll probably do. Approved a few hours ago despite citizen opposition, and only Dunn voted against it, which fits the profile of the King County Council. And remember, collecting the cash. This is just another cash grab scam. So that's what it is. TZ, yep, don't mail them. Don't trust your ballot with the post office. It's too important. Hand deliver it or put it in the drop box, but I would prefer hand delivering it right to the auditor's office. It's the best thing you can do. Do you have any thoughts on Cascadia high-speed rail or other ways to reduce traffic on I-5? The drive to SeaTac this morning was insane, too many people and not enough capacity. Well, Dane, one of the reasons why that happened was because of a horrible accident on 405, if I remember correctly. I've seen something in the news on that. Capacity on the roads. Remember, the Department of Transportation changed the law about 10, 12 years ago, something like that, where they decided that congestion relief was not one of their priorities anymore. And frankly, Sound Transits became the boondoggle that everybody said it would be, and nobody rides it, maybe less than 1% of the population, and yet it absorbs a vast percentage of transportation budget dollars in our state. But again, it's in the boondoggle, good kickback schemes, land transactions, all kinds of stuff going on there. I don't think Cascadia high-speed rail will ever really work. It's not going to probably reduce any traffic in I-5 that would ever be measurable. What you can do is you can increase the size of the freeways, and that would reduce traffic, which it pretty much has every single time it's ever been done in human history. If you do increase the lanes, it increases the traffic. But it's not that simple because there's a little bit more complexity associated with transportation planning. And engineers have come up with solutions on this, but the political class is never going to want to find a real solution here. And so that's the eternal battle that we're going to have when it comes to transportation policy. It's more complicated than that, but that's one of the things that has come up. Jack Palder, did you see the Vancouver City Council members all endorsing voting no on the initiatives? No, but it doesn't surprise me. They aren't alone. Leftists who just exist primarily to grift off the taxpayers and take as much of your cash as they possibly can, especially those who've been promised cash through one of these initiative programs that's getting killed, of course they're going to vote in favor of it because they want more of your money to waste on whatever they want to do. So anyway, that's it. I want to digress for just a minute. Thunderstriker, did you, I'm assuming you meant see, the news the Japanese region had a deadly earthquake and still recovering and is now facing record rains that have flooded its streets. I did see that, but I don't have anything to add to that observation. Are you really accusing Ferguson of kickback schemes? Absolutely, and I'm totally clear about this. I did a complete video on it. One of Ferguson's kickback schemes that he runs out of his office, and here's how the kickback scheme works. doesn't make it necessarily overtly illegal. It's dishonest and immoral. And that is that even though he has 800 attorneys there, he hires all of these other major law firms in Seattle to do legal work for the Attorney General's office. And when he does that, he pays them a healthy sum, so they get paid a lot of money, multi-million-dollar contracts frequently. And conveniently, and not a surprise, a lot of those partners and attorneys in those firms send him campaign contributions back. It is a pay-to-play scheme. His office has done it more than any other attorney general that I've ever found in Washington state history. And that I would consider a kickback scheme. Now, that's not the only one, but it's a clear and obvious one that he directly has total control of at every level. And so, yes, I'm absolutely directly and clearly and as obviously and openly as I possibly can, that is definitely Ferguson's, one of his kickback schemes that he has. And he completely does this stuff as it's not an accident. And, he's not alone probably in that, but it's obnoxious. Let's see. TZ Burton, how do we ensure no one is using our old address to cast a vote in our name? Basically ensure voter rolls are clean. Well, specifically in that case, you would have to go back to your old address, talk to the new people who live there, and make sure they aren't getting ballots there in your name. I would also look at the voter rolls and see if that's happening. And look for very slight variations on your name as well, and see if that's showing up in the voter rolls. It's not easy. It's very hard to do on your own. Assuming that's being done right, you're just going to find out a lot it isn't. And some of it's just because people don't. The first thing you think about if you move is not, oh my God, I got to go tell the auditor that my address has changed. Nobody does that. And so the auditor's office kind of relies on the National Change of Address, NCOA update system to the post office. Sort of. I mean, that's not the only thing they rely on, but it's one of the things they kind of rely on. And listen, it's not easy to keep up with the voter rolls. It isn't. Any given period of time, you're going to have 10% of the population on average moving. It's not actually 10% of the population. It's just that 10% of the total numbers. There's actually, when you look at it, there's some people that move multiple times. And so it skews those numbers up a little bit. And so if you were, let's just say, clean up the voter rolls every month even, you would have enough changes, 1% or so a month, that's very busy to keep up with it. On top of that, you're going to have a number of people that die. I mean, the statistical number of people that die each month, there are actuarial tables that predict this. Most of them are older and voters. And so now you also have to keep track of that. Then you have to keep track of people who are moving in and becoming new voters and people who are leaving to go to the other states. And it isn't easy, so I don't think we should pretend that it's easy. It's just not done well. And when there's not a priority to do it, and when it doesn't matter to do it well, and when there's no way that you can be audited whether you do it well or not, it introduces problems into the voter rolls. Loaves and Fishes. Yep, I attached some of the contracts that in a video that I did on this subject. Thank you for pointing this out. Just a few months ago, and it's going to be on my YouTube channel. And in there, I linked up contracts that reflect the pay-to-play scheme attached to the PDC reports of the campaign contributions those same lawyers gave to Bob Ferguson's campaign. It is an absolutely pay-to-play scheme. Many attorneys around the state have pointed this out to me. It is hardly unknown. Does it mean that Ferguson could go to jail for it? Probably not. Some kickback schemes are, if they're not totally legal, they're in that gray area where there may not be much you can actually do about it. So it is easy, and anybody with a fundamental basic ability to run a records request could do the same thing, but I've already done it, and I published some of those records there. Did you hear about President Biden's latest gaffe on the world stage where he appeared to lose track of events during a press conference with the Prime Minister of India? I did, and he clearly did. Listen, I mean, it's sad to observe who the heck is running our country right now, because it's clearly not him. Is he the only answering questions from some source other than this comment section? I'm only answering questions from the comment section, but I guess I reserve the right to answer any other questions if I feel like it. But generally, I'm only answering the questions that are coming up here. Let's see. Ted C. Why doesn't Reichert try to present himself to the semi-supporters as a type of Eisenhower, not a Democrat or Republican, but principled and effective? I don't know. I can't speak for the Reichert campaign. That doesn't sound unreasonable to me. And you asked that question twice, Ted, but thanks for asking. Thunderstriker, nope, I'm not talking to you. I think this is just some dialogue back and forth. let's see. This is a great question. I thought Reichert was a Democrat until I met him. He's an executive, does what he thinks is told is right. His tragedy, he's surrounded by the swamp for a decade and a half. Yeah, living in D.C. is a good way to destroy your soul, I think. Let's see. Yeah, this is the point. You brought up something earlier, and I am a little behind on the questions. There's some more here, and I'm running out of time. So let me just see if I can catch any quick questions that are up. I'm way behind on these questions, actually. And I'm up to speed now. Okay, thank you. Aviation or Average Geek Joe, Aviation Geek Joe here, sorry, would like to see school levies forced to be on the November ballot. So would I. I think that'd be good, and it'd be better anyway. Hey, Glenn, just to stop you there, if you can't see my previous question, just let me know, and I'll go back and ask it again because YouTube's getting feisty with me. You are not alone on that. Edmond School District from Scully here lost its funding when it was on the general election ballots 4 years ago. Now they're always on special elections, and thank you for explaining it. Yeah, I'm sorry that, I mean, this is actually, it was a wonkish thing that I was arguing about back in 2011 to make these changes to the special election processes. And you can do it, but you have to do it in the legislature. I guess you could do it if you did it as a reform on via initiative. That actually would be a fairly reasonable reform. But anyway, let's see. We had, Loaves and Fishes. We had a Republican secretary say up to build a model for efficient election running, but she was hounded out of her job by death threats after the 2020 election. Yeah, that's not really true. I mean, she was looking for an excuse to get a higher paid job back in D.C. I've known Kim Wyman for a long time. I've actually gotten along really well with her. We disagreed on some things very clearly. I'm not in the camp that was throwing that many darts at her, because I was a little bit more aware of the drama that she had to face dealing with being the only elected Republican. And for a while, there were two. We also had a state treasurer for a while when Dwayne Davidson was in there, but she was essentially the only Republican holding statewide office, and especially in a legislature that wasn't hostile to her. If you look at her testimony in the legislature in opposition to a lot of really stupid and dumb ideas coming through from the Democrat Party, especially same-day voter registration, registering underage voters, expanding the way you registered voters. There were a number of things that I think Kim Wyman's wonkish kind of policy approaches were consistent with anybody who cared about good government. But at the same time, it's not hard to bribe people out of office with higher paid positions and a lot of other promises. And especially if you're getting away from drama that you're trying to deal with. The death threats are very minor and almost an insignificant element to that. And I don't know why people obsess about it. Maybe it's just because I've had so many death threats in the past. But, it's just, if you're going to be out there, that's going to happen. You got weird people that do dumb things. Let's see. Should citizens be made to take some form of an electoral general knowledge test before they're allowed to vote? Well, in theory, they are in order to become a U.S. citizen. But no, if you set up something like that, it would just be gamed to push one side out or the other. Scully, how do we get the state to remove the party section on the outside of the ballot? It looks and feels like voter intimidation. It does. This came up recently with somebody that I know well, but I don't know through the political process. And they told me that when they saw the party affiliation on the outside, to avoid hostile discrimination, they decided to claim they were Democrats. And then they voted the Democrat primary, not for Biden, but whoever. And they did that on purpose because they figured that it would put them in a list of Democrats, even though they aren't. And then they would just go ahead and vote in the general election for Trump in this case. And that it would skew the numbers of the Democrats, which they apparently get robocalls constantly all the time, telling them to collect money for Kamala Harris, and they are never going to do that. But anyway, the voter affiliation on the outside of the ballot is a terrible thing. Let's see. Did you hear that Elon Musk is promoting a parody of mocking Kamala Harris on X after California's new law against deepfakes was inspired by similar videos? I don't know if that's really what he's doing. There was an original parody video that I had shared at one point in time as a pretty good example of parody, and I think it's just the same one. Let's see. But remember, party affiliation. I'm going to go jump ahead here real quick. Let's see. I'm jumping ahead down here to Scully. I'd like to see party preferences removed from all parts of voter registration. It's an invasion of privacy in a process that's supposed to be private. And here's the interesting thing. In Washington State, you haven't had to register by party since the 1930s. That was it was very popular in Washington. We're probably the least partisan state, I'm going to put that in parentheses, of any state in America when it comes to like party affiliation. That being said, there's a long history of this going back almost 100 years now. Not quite, but it's 90 years anyway. What happened was, because of the top two primary system there, and you couldn't change the way a presidential race was going to go, or the fact that presidential races were going to be primaries, were going to be partisan in nature. And so the question was, do you allow the state to do it as a caucus, where the parties have to pay for their own effort to organize these events all around the state to get caucus votes, and that's how they would determine who the partisan presidential candidate was going to be? Or could you make the state pay for it and run what is essentially a private election for the respective two primary parties, the Democrats and Republicans? And the side benefit would be in a state like Washington that doesn't register by party affiliation, now both parties could have their mailing lists, or their funder lists, or their donor lists, or at least a sense of how many people claim to be Republican or how many people claim to be Democrat. The Democrats pushed it. The Republicans didn't fight it that much. And that's how we got to partisan primaries that clearly show, it's ever since the top two primary, jungle primary system came into place. And so that's something that's how we got to where we are now. Now, the decision to put on the outside of the ballot where you could see it, that was purely a choice made by the Secretary of State's office. They didn't have to do that. That's sloppy, lazy, incompetent, and they don't care because they're Democrats and they feel like it benefits them and it suppresses the Republican participation, not the other way around. And so that's one of the reasons why we're in this drama over once every 4 years. You do indicate party preference on the outside of the ballot, and people can see, because it's a public record, which partisan primary you participated in. And that's how it is. That's why we're at where we are now. Is there anyone here old enough to remember the election where Even Jones won a legislative seat by only 3 votes? I am not, but I'll look that up. Thank you for pointing that out. And real quick here, let me just see if there's another question I can get to real quick. Let's see. Harris, disrespectful. That's funny. I don't know. This is somebody who mentioned this, Kamala Harris. If I may say so, you're mispronouncing Harris's first name. It's Kamala, not Kamala. I think it's Kamala. I think I'm saying it right, actually. So anyway, it's just very funny. And I don't care a super lot about it, so it's fine. I try to do my best. Guys, you had a lot more questions. I'm not going to be able to get to them because it's getting late, and I've already run a little bit further than I usually try to do on these live streams. So for now, I just want to thank everybody for signing on today. I think next week we'll be doing the same time. The week after that will probably be a Monday. Think of your questions. You guys had tons of questions. I'm sorry if I didn't get to all of them because I see a bunch that were just piling up at the end. I just couldn't get through that fast. I either probably took too long to get to through the original questions, and I just couldn't get to them. If you want to do something like this with me in person, if I'm doing speaking engagements, I usually do have open Q&A at the end around the state. If you didn't see the list of the whole bunch of places I'll be at, maybe I'll do this real quick. I'll be in Spokane September 26th at the Caper Picnic, October 5th at the Jefferson County Oktoberfest event, speaking there at the Boy Scout meeting. I think the Jefferson County Republicans will have that on their website. I'm also speaking on October 8th at the Benton County Farm Bureau, which I think is just for Farm Bureau members, but maybe if you pay, they'll let you in there too. I don't know. I think it's mainly for Farm Bureau members, though. October 9th, I'll be speaking at the Sharon Hannock fundraiser up in Redmond. And October 12th, I'll be at the Spokane County Republican fundraiser as a primary speaker out there, I believe. And on October 17th, I'll be up in Okanagan training activists at an event up there. And on October 19th, I'll be the MC for the Ellensburg-Kittitas County Republican fundraiser at Central Washington University. So these are all places that I'll be at. And not probably the only places, but that's what I have on my calendar right now over the next few weeks. If I see you then, please make a point of coming up and saying hi. I want to thank you so much for participating tonight. Lots of good questions. It's impossible for me to keep up with all of them, but I'm going to keep doing my best every time. You'll see 2 videos coming out on this channel this week that I filmed earlier today, and hopefully looking forward to your feedback. Feel free to share this channel with others who you think might appreciate this information about Washington State and local news and reporting from the perspective that I have. And for that, I hope all is well, and guys, be safe out there, and we will see you next time.